When the president came to office, he came with ideas that he had articulated on the campaign trail about changing the way our society worked because he didn't think it was functioning correctly in important areas like assistance to low-income people. But he had a very broad view of government, which unfolded over, especially over the first term. So that in 1970, 71, he put forward basic ideas about reforming the organizational structure of the government. And in fact, in 1970, as a precursor to that broader set of reorganization ideas, he converted what had been the Bureau of the Budget that was first established in 1921 into what we now know as the Office of Management and Budget. But it was a first step toward creating a notion of super cabinet agencies and taking what he saw as allied agencies and giving them a combined structure and letting the lead cabinet secretary have an office in the White House to give them a sense of authority over the other departments and agencies that they were empowered to work with. So he came with ideas about, I think, equity and fairness in how we collected money, tax money from the people, and how we made it available for both the necessary things like the Defense Department and more discretionary things like how we help lower income people to raise their standard of living and get a hand up in creating their own job stability. And through this presidency, from 1969 until 1974, he was constantly working on broader sets of ideas, including how we could accomplish real integration in our public schools in the country, which had been unintegrated through history, going back to the earliest days of the country. And one of the things I think not well understood, especially by younger people, is the depth of consideration and understanding and subsequent policy proposals that were put forward by President Nixon in these important areas that define how our society works. You know, I had, during the time of the Nixon administration, I had opportunities to be directly involved with the president. And it's interesting, he was, as other people have observed, he really liked talking about the substance of issues. He was not very comfortable with small talk and chatter about incidental things. And so, you know, I'm sure he had a more personal relationships with people who were really quite close to him. But I found as a staff person, even as I rose in his administration to be an associate director of the Office of Management and Budget, you know, I never felt a buddy relationship. I felt a professional, profoundly demanding relationship because he was smart and he was incisive, and he didn't have a lot of time for people he considered to be unworthy of engagement. And so I like that very much. It was very direct and very, very professional in the times that I worked directly with him. I had been a career person in the Bureau of the Budget beginning in January of 1967, and so when Richard Nixon became President Nixon, I was ensconced in the old executive office building. Had been there for a couple of years, and early on, those of us who were on, in effect, the permanent staff, reached out to try to understand what does the new president want to accomplish. And there were a couple of small volumes that had been put together by staff people in the campaign. One was called Nixon Speaks Out, and the second was called Nixon on the Issues. And these were our Bible before we got to know the president for considering policy formulation. So when a new president comes in, one of the first things that they do is within a month's time fashion their own set of budget and policy proposals. And without the guidance that we had from the campaign documents, we would have been at sea trying to figure out whether the president wanted to add more money to a particular activity or subtract money from a particular activity. But these documents gave a basis for raising questions with the White House staff about continuation or adding or subtracting to existing programs or calling for the elimination of existing programs. So the first few months of a new administration, I would say, if people in other countries understood this, are maybe the most dangerous times in our polity, because it's before the new appointed people really understand their roles and they don't know how to function very well together as a team. And one of the important roles of the professional career staff in those transition periods is to not direct, but help shape how to organize things and organize people and departments and agencies so that they can consider presidential policies. And so I was lucky early in the Nixon administration, I was assigned to work on the major domestic initiatives with the senior political appointee who had come in, whose name was Richard Nathan, who's been a lifelong friend since 1969. And I was privileged to go sit in all of the meetings on the back bench, to be sure, but to listen to every conversation of all the cabinet secretaries, including Finch and George Shultz, who was in the early days the Secretary of Labor, and to see John Ehrlichman in his early role as a listener before he became the head of the Domestic Council, and to meet John Price, another person who's become a lifelong friend, who had interacted with candidate Nixon and talked with him about competing ideas about welfare reform as early as, I think, January of 1968. So for me, it was a wonderful experience to be at the heart of policy making and to learn about how to think about and help to be shaping a policy that can affect every citizen. I think an underpinning of Nixon policy ideas, as I saw it, in a broad sense, was to create the fabric in the United States of what I call a just society. And what that means is equity and fairness and equal opportunity. And I saw those elements present in everything that we did during the Nixon presidency, from welfare to really landmark ideas about how we should provide universal health insurance to every citizen of the United States in a way that was far better than what's come on us in 2009, to ideas of revenue sharing, so that we use the progressive tax system to collect money, but then distribute it in a way that was leveling, if you will, in terms of fiscal capacity, so that states with low income and not much fundraising capacity could be assisted so that they had the money that's necessary to perform governmental activities at the state and local level. You know, the ideas of job creation that President Nixon put on the table were fundamentally about creating opportunities for people to achieve in the U.S. society and not to be left behind, but to achieve on merit. So I think the just society ideas run through like a marble cake everything that you see and that was done in the Nixon administration.